I'm reminded of the quote by the great Robert Duvall in the great film Days of Thunder, when Tom Cruise appears for the first time. They haven't spent time together in a long time, and Robert Duvall is, we'll bring out the moonshine, we'll start telling lies and calling up the women, but no talk about racing. Of course, they then proceed to immediately start talking about racing. But I, unlike Robert Duvall, will not break my promise to you. No talk about basketball today. We've talked a lot about basketball all week. We'll talk basketball again, I'm sure, tomorrow in the mailbag and after Saturday's game and next week when we do the morning pits. But for today, at least, no more talk about basketball. And I promise, I'm going to stick to it. We're going to talk a little football today, just to mix it up, get a little football conversation. I think we talked football earlier this week, too, actually. And spring camp is probably about 2 weeks away or so. The first week of March is spring break for Pitt. And so I think spring camp starts the next week, even though these things are planned long in advance. They haven't made any public announcement of the fact that spring camp starts the second week of March. But either way, it's coming up soon. We've been talking to football players really over the last 4 or 5 weeks, the newcomers, the incoming transfers, and incoming freshmen. I think we wrapped that up yesterday. I think we did the final one yesterday. We talked to all the different linebackers and defensive backs. It was pretty interesting to talk to Rashawn Murray, a guy from East Liberty who went to Cal PA for a few years and now here is at Pitt, looking to finish his career at a place that he always hoped he would get an opportunity to play. Kavir Baines Marquez, a safety from California who went to UC Davis, walked on at UC Davis for a couple of years before earning his scholarship, earning some accolades, and being a really good player. We got a chance to talk to him. That was a really interesting story to hear from as well. All the different guys who are coming in. Jaden Bonsu, the safety at Ohio State, who's going to come in and play star linebacker at Pitt. Justin Thompson, the freshman linebacker, who's coming in to be a middle linebacker, which I think is pretty intriguing to see him and get a look at those guys. All these different guys that we've talked about, through their recruitment, either as a high school prospect or as a transfer. We're going to get a chance to actually speak with them and hear from them, see them in person. And we've got all those videos on our YouTube channel right here, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. But today I thought we'd have a different conversation, something we actually talked about a little bit earlier this week on the message boards. It was a conversation there, a bit of a conversation starter post that I put up, and I thought it was interesting enough that we could have the conversation here as well, because it's a list. I mean, you've already seen the headline. Who are the top 5 returning players, right? And so it's a list of the top 5 returning players, according to me at least. But I only kind of get through 4. And I had this problem on the message boards too. And I think it's probably what sparked most of the conversation in that thread, that I'm not really sure who my 5th guy is. So let's talk about the 4 who I'm pretty sure about. And I think you could probably guess who they are, particularly if you saw the message board thread earlier this week. And then we'll have a little conversation about who that 5th guy might be. So who are the top 5 returning players for this Pitt football team in 2025? You don't feel good about basketball. You don't want to talk about basketball. I'm on board with that. So let's talk a little football here on the Thursday edition of the Morning Pit. youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Yeah, it's Thursday. It's the Morning Pit, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. You know what we always ask you to do? Like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com so that way you don't miss any of our Pitt video content. We have these daily Morning Pit videos. We have our weekly live show that we do every Wednesday night. We have post-game shows on occasion. We did one of those on Saturday after the Notre Dame game. I don't know if we'll have one on Saturday after the Louisville game. I have to see what's going on that evening. But but we do post-game shows occasionally. We do them after all the football games. We do them after some of the basketball games. We have press conferences and interviews and post-game press conferences and all those different things. All those videos are all right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So if you want to make sure you don't miss any of our Pitt video content, subscribe to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, and that way you will be locked in for all of it. And of course, check out the website, Panther-Lair.com. Panther-Lair.com, the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet, football, basketball, and recruiting. You find it all at Panther-Lair.com and message boards to interact with hundreds and thousands of other Pitt fans. All day, every day, Pitt fans are hanging out on the message boards, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. All right, so top 5 players on the team. And I think this is not a situation where you count down, you start at 5 and work your way down to 1 for the big reveal about number 1, because honestly, there's no big reveal about number one. I think everybody would probably agree, and I think you'd get very little pushback on this, that the number one player on the team, the top returning player on the team, is Kyle Lewis. Kyle Lewis had a breakout season last year. He was an All-American, should have been an ACC Defensive Player of the Year finalist, first-team All-Conference player, and all those things. The only thing you would hold against Kyle Lewis from his performance last season is that maybe he fell off a little bit late in the year. He played a ton, played more than he ever has. Maybe he got a little bit worn down. They really didn't have any backups. There was nobody really to replace him with. I think Jordan Bass got hurt, if I recall correctly, and so he wasn't available. And to be honest, the depth situation is something to keep an eye on this year as well, because I don't think there's any clear, obvious number two at the star linebacker position. I think you probably feel pretty good about your starting lineup of Kyle Lewis, Braylon Lovelace, and Rashim Biles. I assume that's what the top three linebackers will be, with Lewis and Biles on the outside and Lovelace at middle linebacker. But really, once you get past them, your backups are the guys who came in last year's freshmen. Cam Lindsey from Aliquippa, Jeremiah Marcelin, Davin Bruton. Those are probably going to be your two deep players. And I'm not sure which guy, either Lindsey or Marcelin, sort of projects at that star linebacker position. They try and teach these linebackers to play all the spots, but there is some difference. And the differences are probably, money linebacker and middle linebacker. There's a lot of overlap. Star linebacker is the position that's sort of a little bit unique because it plays the wide side of the field, almost functions as a in the box safety kind of. I think there's sort of similarities to that. It's almost a hybrid strong safety outside linebacker position, but there are still blitzing responsibilities. There are coverage responsibilities. Everybody has run stopping responsibilities, so we almost don't even have to mention that. But it's a unique position. I've suggested to the coaches in the past, and I haven't gotten a ton of pushback. I think most of the coaches have more or less agreed, although they don't typically think in these terms. But I remember asking, it might have been Josh Conklin, during those couple of years when he was on staff as the defensive coordinator, is the star linebacker the most difficult position to play in this defense? And, coaches, I think, look at every single position and think that every position is the most difficult position to play because it's not. I think they don't like the implication that some of the other positions are easier to play, that corner is easier to play than star linebacker, or the defensive tackle is easier to play than field safety or something like that. I don't think they like that implication. So when you ask, is this the most difficult position to play, it's sort of implied that some other positions are not as difficult. And so they tend to push back. But the coaches have more or less agreed that in terms of responsibilities and what's on their plate, there's not a lot that compares to the star linebacker. Maybe the field safety position, with that added pressure being the last line of defense. But the star linebacker has a whole lot to do, maybe more than any other position on defense. And so it's a unique spot, and it's a spot where you need a unique type of player. There are guys who are a fit at the middle linebacker and money linebacker positions, but they don't necessarily fit at the star linebacker. I don't know if, Key Thompson or Brandon George last year would have been a fit at the star linebacker. I don't know if Shane Simon would have really fit well at the star linebacker. But, there are guys. There's guys like Servassier Dennis, Kyle Lewis, probably Biles and Lovelace who could play all three linebacker spots. But, there is some separation there. Not everybody can do all three, or not everybody can play both outside spots. So, long way around of getting to the point that there is a question of depth behind Kyle Lewis. Jaden Bonsu, who came in as a transfer from Ohio State, a former safety himself, so he's sort of a natural fit for that position, could be the backup there and maybe steps in. He's a third-year guy. He's been in college for a few years. He's been through strength and conditioning program. He's been through Big Ten football. Even if he didn't get on the field, he's still been around it. And so he could be a possibility there, or, maybe Cam Lindsey could step in there, or Jeremiah Marcelin. We'll see which one of those redshirt freshmen, although Marcelin didn't redshirt. He's a true sophomore. But we'll see which one of those second-year guys is really ready to step in and play. But Kyle Lewis, though, coming way back around to where we started here, Kyle Lewis, I think, is clearly the number one player on the team. I am definitely going to trumpet that as much as I can because you guys, rightfully so, give me a hard time about Bengali Kamara all the time. And now, this year, maybe Amsal Delalich a little bit, although like Robert Duvall said, we are not going to talk about racing. I rightfully take a lot of stuff for how much I touted Bengali Kamara and how much he fell short of it. So I touted Kyle Lewis pretty well. And people last year in the summer were saying, stop doing that. You're just going to set yourself up to, create another bust. But it didn't happen. He turned into a great player. He was a great player. He had a great season, an All-American season. And I think he's clearly the number one player on the team. Number two, I think you would have to go with Desmond Reed. Also an All-American, and when I say it like that, like I think you would have to go with. That's not because I have any hesitation about putting Desmond Reed in the top three, and I think he's a pretty clear option as number two. I mean, just such a versatile weapon, a guy who can do so many things for you, taking handoffs, catching passes, returning kicks and punts. Although personally, I would take him off those duties of kick and punt return. I don't think he was on kick return. He was just on punt return. There's too much. He provides too much value on offense that, they got one punt return touchdown. They got some decent long returns from Desmond Reed, but he just provides too much value on offense that I think there's no reason to put any extra hits on his body. And again, I'm not someone who says Desmond Reed is fragile or anything like that. I don't believe that to be the case. I think he is really tough. I think Pat Narduzzi's not lying that he's one of the toughest guys on the team. But I'm still not taking any running back. If it's me, I'm not taking any running back and putting any extra hits on him there. There's no need for it. There's no reason for him to return punts. I know he's exciting and explosive and fast, and he can turn a punt return into a touchdown for sure, but they have other fast guys on the team. Save Desmond Reed for offense where he can make the biggest impact and longest and most sustained impact on the team's success. That's what I say. But it's, a credit to him and his playmaking ability that we would even have a conversation like that about whether Desmond Reed should be returning punts or just limited to offense. He's just that good. He's that explosive. When he touches the ball, there's a chance he's going to end up in the end zone every time. And there aren't a lot of guys you can legitimately, sincerely say that about. But Desmond Reed is one. And he might be one of one. Top in 500 rushing and 500 receiving yards last year, plus the punt return activity. He earned his All-America status. And I think he's going to be really good again this year. You got to keep him on the field, but you would say that about any running back. It's not just, Desmond Reed, because you look at last year, Pitt had two running backs suffer season-ending injuries, right? Daniel Carter and Derek Davis both suffered big injuries. It's just and you could go back over the years. James Conner, but forget cancer, he got hurt. He got hurt every year he was at Pitt. His healthiest year was the year he came back from beating cancer. Quadri might have stayed relatively healthy, but he didn't have a huge workload. Izzy Abanikanda missed games. Rodney Hammond missed games. It's a physical position, and your body takes a lot of beating. And so, with any running back, if you have a superlative running back, a guy who truly is one of the best, you have to do everything you can to keep him on the field, and a lot of your success will depend on your ability to do so. So for Pitt, they've got to keep Desmond Reed on the field. Because if they do, it gives them a much better chance to win. My number three guy is Rashim Biles. And in some respects, Biles might have filled the stat sheet just as well, if not better than Kyle Lewis. And if he was behind Lewis, he was number two on the team in filling the stat sheet. You could go back to Todd Thomas. Todd Thomas was the first guy I remember, the first Pitt linebacker I remember looking at and being like, this guy could legitimately put up 3 to 5 in every stat category: tackles for loss, sacks, interceptions, pass deflections, forced fumbles, fumble recoveries. He could go across the board of getting, some kind of legitimate, valuable, game-impacting production in basically every stat. And there were other guys along the way. Do you remember Greg Williams? He was going to be a running back. He moved to linebacker. He ended up having sort of a knack for making plays, interceptions, and fumble returns and things like that. But Todd Thomas was the first guy that I was like, this guy can fill up the stat sheet. Bengali Kamara obviously was a guy that I thought was capable of doing that. I still think he's capable of doing that. He just has never done it. Kyle Lewis did it last year, and Rashim Biles absolutely did it last year as well. And I think there's a world where Biles might even have more upside than Lewis. And we'll talk about this a lot over, up to the season. But just with his size, like he's bigger than Kyle Lewis. Speed, I'm not sure about. But because of his size, I think he can he has the potential to make an even bigger impact than Lewis did. And that's not in any way taking anything away from what Lewis did. I mean, Kyle Lewis was awesome last year. I think Rashim Biles can be awesomer. And these two guys as the outside linebackers can be dominant. Two of the best outside linebacker, maybe the best outside linebacking tandem in the ACC. I think their ceiling, that's where it really is. And so I'm listing Biles number 3 here, partially because Desmond Reed is just that good, partially because I think Biles has a huge area to grow. I think he has a lot of space to grow and keep growing and keep getting better. And I think we could get to the end of the season next year and be like, yeah, Rashim Biles is the best player on this team. I think his ceiling is just that high. And so I'm putting him in my top 5 here. I'm putting him in my top 3. At number 4, I got to put Eli Holstein in here. And for a number of reasons. Number 1, I think he played really well for the most part over the first 7 games. That 7-0 winning streak doesn't happen without Eli Holstein. Yeah, and that's not to say he was solely responsible for every win. He obviously was not in the Syracuse game. That was not his win. That was Kyle Lewis's win and Rashim Biles' win and Braylon Lovelace's win and Brandon George's win. The linebackers, the Sharks, won that game. Eli Holstein did not. But Eli Holstein, I don't know that they win at Cincinnati without Eli Holstein. I don't know that they beat West Virginia without Eli Holstein. I don't know that they win at North Carolina without Eli Holstein. He didn't do it by himself. He wasn't the only player responsible for victories in those games. But I don't think they win without him. You know what I mean? 7-0 is, 5-2 or 4-3 without Eli Holstein, I think. And then you compound that with what happened to the offense and the team after Holstein got hurt. I think you put those two things together, like what they did with him and what they were unable to do without him. And I think that puts Holstein in the top 5. He was not perfect by any means. He's certainly got a lot of things he needs to improve on. He had some real stupefying moments. And I certainly wouldn't sit here and say that they would go 12-0 with Eli Holstein. But I think they beat, let's say, Virginia and Boston College right off the bat. And, he probably gives them a chance to win that Clemson game. So now you're looking at 9-10 wins if Holstein can stay healthy, which should be the expectation in 2025, that if Holstein can stay healthy, this team can win 9 or 10 games. If Holstein can stay healthy, that's going to be the big puzzle. And there's a lot that goes into that, obviously, with the blocking and all of that. But I think Eli Holstein probably is a top 5, top 4 returning player based on the strength of what Pitt did with him and what Pitt did without him. But number 5 is where it gets a little tricky because I'm just not sure there's a great and obvious option. Is it Kenny Johnson, who was underutilized but should be really good? Is it Lyndon Cooper, who was starting center and I think did a decent job? Is it Ryan Baer, who moved from right tackle to left tackle and did everything he could, although it didn't always work out, but maybe he's the number 5? Is it like a guy like Francis Brew? Is it a guy like Cruz Brookins? Is it, potential-wise Sean Fitzsimmons? Is it, Isaiah Neal could take a giant step this year? And I think he's absolutely capable of that. I'm excited to see what he does this year. I'm excited to see what Francis Brew does this year. Jasir Whittington. Those young defensive tackles, I think, can be really good in 2025. But do any of them crack the top 5 returning players? Just not sure that they do. But if they don't, I don't know who does. I kind of lean toward Kenny Johnson. But, that dude's going to be a junior this year. You've got to get him the ball. Let him make some plays for you, which they have been unwilling or unable to do, at least last year. The year before, he was a true freshman. But last year, I think he had 70 targets. I mean, you got to get more targets than that for Kenny Johnson. And I think he will get more targets than that this year. He should get more targets than that this year. He needs more targets than that this year. So I don't know. This is where I'll leave it kind of open-ended. Got us up to the 20-minute marker. So I'll leave it open-ended here. Who's your guy? First of all, do you think I screwed up that order of the first four? Lewis, Reed, Biles, Holstein. And then who's your fifth guy? Who else fits into that group? I'd love to hear what you have to say about it. So post it in the comments here on YouTube or put it on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. Don't forget the website Panther-Lair.com. It's the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet. We have all kinds of content for you with football, basketball, and recruiting, but we also have message boards where you can talk to other Pitt fans. This is the best online community of Pitt fans you're going to find, and it's a great place to talk about questions like this of, who's the fifth best returning player? I'd love to get your thoughts. All right. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe. YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We'll have our Morning Pitt mailbag tomorrow. Looking forward to it. Wrapping up the month of February with tomorrow's mailbag. So that'll be a lot of fun. We always enjoy doing those. There's still time to get your questions in on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. So post your comments, post your questions. We'll answer as many as we can in the mailbag on Friday. And until then, have a great Thursday. We'll catch up with you tomorrow for the Morning Pitt right here on YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com.